We're also joined by Sally Bear. Is that right pronunciation, Sally?
Yeah, you're the first person ever to get that right.
Good God, amazing. You're a local health writer and...
campaigner against 5G. Oh, and nutritional therapist.
So why 5G? Why has this got your goat?
Anyone who has read about the actual scientific evidence about the health effects of 5G and the potential catastrophic consequences for the environment and wildlife, I'm sure will feel the same that I do.
But isn't this another sort of Project Fear, fake news? What evidence have you got that it's in any way dangerous? I mean, 4G, 3G, I mean, we don't have sort of people walking around with 3 or 4 heads yet, do we?
We have a cancer epidemic and an epidemic of neurological problems and massively growing health issues amongst young people, and a long list of health issues that can be traced back to 4G and 3G and Wi-Fi. What's happened with 5G is it's crossed a line. There are so many scientists bringing out so many studies to show that the electromagnetic radiation and radio frequency microwave radiation are a serious health issue, that we're now realising that the existing electromagnetic radiation we have is bad enough, but this is going to be exponentially worse.
Oh dear. Well, we think that we need to have a bit of balance, really. Let's get the industry into the studio, people who are doing this, making lots and lots and lots of money out of it, to come in. For example, we've got Bristol Smart Cities, which is a whole sort of project which is designed to try and get the Internet of Things into our homes. And Freya Lockwood, she couldn't make it. She said she might be able to do another week. And then I spoke to Bristol is Open, which is also a research project which is looking at technologies related to 5G. Julie Snell is the chief executive. She's massively enthusiastic about 5G. She's done gushing interviews and reports about how wonderful it will be. She, though, over the 2 weeks that it's being introduced in Bristol's taken annual leave, so she's not around to talk, which is a great pity. No one else there can say anything. So again, I'll keep trying to get one of these people on to talk about 5G. Then of course, the people who are going to make the most money out of this is Vodafone, Sally. And somebody called James Hope is their head of networks. Vodafone are doing no press interviews at all. But I did track down an interview that James Hope did a few months ago about 5G, where he's asked, what is 5G? So why is this so necessary, this technology? And I'll ask you, after we've heard from him, to say what you think.
Essentially, 5G is a technology that allows us to download and upload things a lot quicker. In fact, probably 4 times the speed of 4G that we currently receive today. 5G also gives us super quick latency. So when we're applying that to maybe gaming on the move, we won't see much buffering, and it will be a better experience all round. There's a massive benefit from 5G, not only about the quicker download speeds and the super quick latency, but also, in terms of the way in which we go about our daily business. For example, here at the airport, if you think about how people get to the airport, the flow of traffic in and out of the airport, being able to understand congestion into the airport, being able to understand how people move around the airport and how we can reduce queuing, how we can enable smart baggage, smart vehicles around the airport, and also things like building security and surveillance. 5G and future technologies can really enhance us in these kind of areas.
So that was James Hope. He's head of networks at Vodafone, who have got the contract for Bristol. They switched it all on apparently last Wednesday, but they don't want to talk about it, even though, of course, they're the ones that are making the money, Sally.
Well, my flippant answer to having less queuing and less congestion is that 5G will kill everyone, so there's going to be less people. My more serious answer, although I'm not entirely joking when I say that, the more serious answer is, first of all, I'd like to hear a bit more explanation about how that is going to cause less congestion and less queuing, because supposing everyone does live there's still going to be as many people flying, especially with the airport expansions.
Well, I'm not sure he
guff.
made it clear, really,
No,
why traffic jams coming into airports are going to be sorted out, and you're going to be able to manoeuvre around them via 5G. I mean, is there going to be a 5G drone come and pick you up and take you over the top of the jam?
Who knows, but is it worth it? You have to have benefits outweighing the cost. And anyone who wants to know what 5G actually means, I mean, first of all, how is more gaming on the move beneficial? I mean, that's not a benefit, it's an outcome, and it's really debatable about whether that's a benefit. Secondly, everybody who wants to know what 5G is and whether they, when I say they, I mean the people who stand to benefit financially, know themselves what the outcome of 5G is. They don't. Watch the video of Tom Wheeler, head of the FCC in America, who's one of the major figures pushing this, and one of Donald Trump's main men. Watch the video about him talking about 5G. He actually says, if anyone tells you that they know what 5G actually is going to mean in terms of outcomes, run for the hills, because we have no idea. It's all unknown. That's what he says. This is entirely about money, and the PR and brochuring about some kind of vague wishy-washy idea about this being about smart tech, being green tech, is 100% false, and anyone who falls for that needs to take a really good look about what it actually
one
means.
of the best arguments I've heard is that actually one of the things we really need is fibre that comes into our homes, and it takes much, much less energy to get the data around than pumping this out through some wireless network, which goes into hundreds of people's houses that don't use it or don't want it.
Right, and we're all being mandatorily exposed to this. It is an environmental pollutant, putting it in the air. If people want these incredibly fast connections for whatever reason, then, yeah, sure, cabled is much safer. In fact, there's a group called SafeG who are all about cabling everything. So why are they subjecting all of us, including children and pregnant women who are more susceptible, to this? Most of us don't want it. Those who want it, fine, get it cabled then.
Martin Summers, he snuck in there, did James Hope from Vodafone, a little thing about surveillance at the end, didn't he?
Yeah, but I mean, that's just boilerplate. For what he means is you're not going to have your pocket picked at the airport. I mean, obviously, more cynical people will say, well, we're surveyed enough as it is. But then, that's just the way in which language is used.
But I mean, what he's saying there, effectively, is that not only will people who like to keep an eye on people, whatever it is, the police, the government, private industry, know much more about where you are, what your movements, what you're doing. But this whole network itself is potentially hackable. I mean, we've heard that worries about Huawei, haven't we?
Well, I think what happened with Edward Snowden, of course, he was a subcontractor to the NSA, and he had security clearance, and he went in there with an MP3 and stole the crown jewels of US surveillance, and he's ended up in Russia with that MP3.
You don't know.
That's the problem.
I think you mean Martin, I think you mean a memory stick, don't you?
Well,
an MP3 is this programme of the podcast download.
The point I'm making about all this surveillance is, if somebody else can hack him from the other side, then all the work you've done surveying what you're surveying is then in the hands of your enemies. Hezbollah, a few years ago in Lebanon, after Rafik Hariri was assassinated, they were blamed for it, and they gave a press conference in Beirut, said, we don't really want to give too much away, and we don't really want to do this, but we're going to show you the video feed from the Israeli drone which fired the missile that killed him, because we've hacked into the Israeli system. So the Israelis have got massive surveillance systems. They're probably the leaders in the world of this kind of thing. Of course, the other thing, the Hezbollah just say, right, we'll have all of that. Thank you. That's how it works.
Julie Snell, hope to have her on this programme once she gets back from holiday, from Bristol is Open. Her background is working for BT, which of course is one of the networks, so it doesn't sound like she's necessarily going to be rooting for the public. Sounds like she's more of an industry person. But so she's a former BT employee for several years, and also an interior designer. I mean, it doesn't sound like necessarily the sort of person who's going to be looking after public interests.
Well, of course not. That's a very serious conflict of interest, isn't it? Is she claiming to be doing something in the public interest? I mean, you can't do something that's purportedly in the public interest unless you're looking at the science, which is indisputable, that shows this is a serious health hazard. That is not working for the public interest. This is not going to make people richer or do anything about the rich and poor divide. This is going to make telecoms a lot of money.
Yes, Vodafone. Strange, though, that they don't want to come on. They have sent me a statement, which I'll read out in a minute. But, Sally, just tell us about your petition and some of the evidence that backs it up.
some of the evidence is two very large recent studies that were done last year, both on rats whose disease patterns are 97% similar to ours, which is why they're used. So one was a huge multi-million-dollar study from the US Department of Toxicology. And they found that if they exposed rats to mobile radiation, they had significantly more heart and brain tumours. And this study, the 15 physicians were called in to verify it, and they all said there was clear evidence there is a link between mobile radiation and cancer. But then a huge PR assault was done on it, and the FDA said, yes, but the amounts were sort of short bursts of high radiation, so that doesn't count. It doesn't show anything about humans in real life. But however, that's completely untrue, because at the same time, a huge Italian study looked at replicated what happens with humans with the sort of lower level Wi-Fi and mobile radiation over a long period of time. So they made the conditions similar to how it is for humans, and got the exact same result. And then at the same time last year, there's this common misconception that brain tumours are decreasing. But if you tease out the actual brain tumours that are linked with mobile radiation, which is called glioma, and it's a very aggressive kind, which you can't survive, those were the kind that the rats got. Those have doubled in the last 20 years. And in young people, it's one of the fastest growing forms of cancer. They can't necessarily prove that that's caused by mobile radiation, but obviously we have to look at that in the context of the rat studies. And then there are 2,000 peer-reviewed studies, which all show harmful bioeffects, and there's a load of studies that show harmful bioeffects on all living things.
Okay,
it's
so
xenobiotic.
have the council been listening to you here in Bristol?
Some of the councillors have been listening. So I went to the Green councillors and had a meeting with them, and they were concerned. But there is more people in the Green Party to deal with, and they have to take their time. Quite rightly, they have to take their time looking at everything and considering it. So I'd say they are considering. Lib Dems are definitely listening. In some areas, there's a couple of Lib Dem councillors in Bristol who were at Marvin Rees's question time last night, which was a sort of, I didn't go, but one of my co-campaigners went, and I just had an update from her last night. But there were 8 5G campaigners there asking questions and being fobbed off by the Public Health England representative there, who was saying we've been studying this and it's perfectly safe. But the Public Health England studies don't take into account the 2,000 plus. It's actually up to 25,000 studies that show harmful effects from electromagnetic radiation. They talk about studies, their information is 20 years out of date. It talks about thermal effects, which are just not the point.
Okay, who does the regulation?
Effects.
Who is supposed to regulate this?
Well, ICNIRP, which is the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, which you would think would be a body which protects us from non-ionising radiation protection, but they're an industry-loyal body made up of self-selected members who don't declare their funding and have been accused in the Journal of Oncology of a very serious conflict of interest. They have members within the World Health Organization and are also linked with Public Health England. So none of these bodies can be trusted. They're all using information that's 20 years out of date, and the hundreds of scientists who are appealing urgently for them to update their guidelines to incorporate the actual evidence. They're ignoring it, and they're not listening.
Okay, so what the Vodafone people sent me is from an anonymous Vodafone UK spokesperson. When someone sends it anonymously, I do wonder, is this because there may be some sort of legal challenge afterwards, and that they might be legally responsible for people's illnesses? Anyway, let me just finish this. Yeah, the radio frequencies used for 5G in the UK are similar to the ones currently used for 4G, where 4G uses frequencies between 800 megahertz and 2.6 gigahertz. 5G uses frequencies between 3.4 gigahertz and 3.6 gigahertz. Well, that's a little bit more, isn't it? In comparison, your television transmission uses frequencies of up to 806 megahertz, and Wi-Fi is between 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. In fact, 5G spectrum has been used for many years in the UK, just not by the mobile operators. We follow all guidelines laid out in the Code of Best practice for consulting and communicating with local authorities and communities. In addition, we carefully design our sites so that the impact of any changes, including swapping 4G antenna situated on a mast for a 5G one, is kept to a minimum. These alterations do not require operators to inform the local authorities. Also, all our sites are designed and operated in accordance with the International Commission of Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, as we just heard, an industry body. ICNIRP guidelines. For further information on 5G and health, you can find that at themediacentre.vodafone.co.uk/5G. And let's hear again then from the boss at Vodafone, the people who are making all the money out of this, or most of it anyway, James Hope, who is not doing any media interviews at all, I was told today, but here's one he did a few months ago. And here he talks about whereabouts it is in Manchester, where it's already been rolled out. I imagine something similar going on here in Bristol, as it's supposed to have rolled out last week.
We announced last year that we were going to launch 5G in 7 regions within the UK, Manchester being one of them. Obviously in the northwest we have Liverpool's in there as well, but in Manchester especially because we did the first 5G holographic call last year. We've also just started working on the new Digital Innovation Hub at the Landing in Media City, which is really cool. And we thought, we're a better place to start. We've got 5G here at the airport. Manchester is the first UK airport to have 5G, so it was just our next phase of commitment towards the northwest. So in Manchester we have our trial polygon. We have a trial polygon, an area in the city centre. We also have a big hub in Windsor, which we've got 5G live on, and now the airport. So what we'll do is we'll slowly grow out of the existing areas in the city centre, grow out, and we'll try to emulate where we started with our 4G coverage. But it will take some time, but that's the aim. We fully anticipate there to be handsets on the market this half of this year. So when we get the handsets in there and the 5G network is available, consumers will be able to use and experience 5G for real.
That's James Hope, Head of Networks at Vodafone, who's not doing any press interviews, which is apparently, Sally, why he refused to come in today to discuss this with you.
They must be rattled. First of all, they keep claiming, because whenever people comment on the on their YouTube videos, there's a YouTube video which either Vodafone or EE, I can't remember, but hundreds of thumbs down, and all the comments had been disabled, and people are sort of bombarding their Facebook pages with messages saying, this is harmful to health, and then they wheel out these, but we're only rolling it out at lower frequencies. Well, first of all, we have thousands of studies to show that the lower frequencies are harmful. Secondly, we have thousands of studies to show that the emissions below the accepted guidelines are harmful. Thirdly, the UK and US guidelines are unbelievably high compared with in other cities. And fourthly, if you read that statement that you read out before from Vodafone or whatever it is, it sounds reassuring, but if you actually read it, it means absolutely nothing whatsoever. It's really carefully worded. It says things like, we've been studying microwave radiation for 50 years.
Well, yes, that's right. They
don't actually say anything.
Microwaves really started in World War II with radar. And I noticed, looking at the frequencies and the power, is that the 5G networks are actually higher frequencies than radar and higher power than radar. So since we know that radar signals, and people were injured in the Second World War, they didn't tell anybody about it because they were fighting a war, through radar signals, we're now dealing with something which is even more powerful, even where we know that and higher frequency, even though we know it's harmful. Anyway, look, Sally, if you could just wind up by telling us how to find the... Oh, hang on. Before, I should let you comment on this, Anne. What do you make of it?
I find it quite interesting because it's clear that this is coming out when there's no real demand for it. But what we do see a great demand for in the country is decent Wi-Fi coverage and decent broadband coverage. And if you're living in the country, you are cut off from the network.
Oh, so
and this is not going to help.
Is Portishead the country? I suppose it is, really.
Well, Portishead's got appalling broadband in some areas, but overall it's far, far worse than Bristol. But I'm not going to get onto that. But it's really when you go into what I call the real countryside, where you can't get any signal whatsoever. And to talk about introducing 5G with the enormous cost that's going to be at a time when we haven't even got functional phone coverage across the whole of the UK, I just think is reckless. I can't see the point of it.
And what about regulation? Because if we were to leave the European Union, I almost hesitate to say this, on the 31st of October, if that was to happen, and Britain was to be in charge of regulating this rather than the EU, would it make any difference? I would suggest to you it probably won't.
Well, the EU is obviously a big proponent of 5G, isn't it? It's one of its power grabs because it knows it's being left behind by the US mainly, but also the Far East on technology, and it sees this as a great opportunity to catch up. So, of course, once we leave the EU, when we leave the EU, we will be in a position to make our own rules, and we can look after ourselves. Thank you very much.
That was very confident of saying when we leave. Do you have any inside information?
I wish.
Anyway, look, Sally, could you just tell us where we can find your petition and where people can find out a little bit more about 5G from your point of view, given that the Bristol Smart Cities Bristol is open and Vodafone have not managed to make it here today?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. So Facebook pages Halt 5G in the Southwest and Bristol Residents Against 5G. We have loads of resources on there, lots of studies, videos, fantastic videos such as 5G in 5 minutes. Amazing video from Raymond Broomhall in Australia, who has been winning cases all over the place. He's just had, he talks about getting 900 masts removed and 1,600 more stopped because a load of doctors and lawyers got real narky when they discovered those masts were going near their neighbourhoods. He says, doctors tend to get very narky when they find out a mast is going to be near them. Think about that for a minute, Public Health England. The petition is Pause Bristol's 5G rollout. We've got nearly 6,000 signatures. We're definitely entitled now to trigger a full debate, which sounds great, but it's actually only 20 minutes. But that'll be in September. So please sign it and share. I say share it with one friend with a Bristol postcode or a handful of friends, but rather than putting it on your Facebook pages, which people tend to ignore, I think it's a really good idea to get one or two trusted friends to sign it. It's doing really well. It's a really active petition. There are thousands of people who do not want this technology and are horrified and feel violated and looking into legal action.
So you're a Luddite?
No, no, I'm not a Luddite. As I've said, we want safe tech and totally agree, but better connectivity for others, and you can have a safe version of Wi-Fi in your house if you use DLAN plugs and plug them into your Wi-Fi router. So I have a Wi-Fi router, but the wireless part is disabled and it's all plugs and it's perfectly fast.
What do you do? Do you unscrew it and sort of, I don't know, use a pair of cutters and chop out some component in there? How do you turn off your Wi-Fi?
No, that's what people are going to be doing to the lampposts when they're beaming 5G. No, it's really easy. You just go into a hub and advanced settings and disable it. You have to go into your provider's
So it's actually possible
thing.
to do. I must admit, when I first had Wi-Fi in my house, I thought, this isn't. I don't like it. Actually, you can feel it. Can kind of feel it in the air. And I turned it off.
Yeah,
Martin Summers. So thanks, Sally. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Martin, what Sally there is saying is slightly serious, isn't it? Over the mobile phone masts and people taking direct action if they're not listened to over these health issues. I know in Belfast, for example, the IRA went in and actually angle grinded off masts, didn't they, when they first started arriving? And they said that was because the locals didn't want them there. That was back in the 90s.
Yeah, but what you're coming back to is what you mentioned, surveillance earlier. They were very concerned about surveillance. So obviously they disabled everything which they thought was surveying people because it's part of what they were up for. And that's what happened. And of course, the Iraqi resistance realised years ago that the way to fight the Americans is just not use electronic components at all. The same with the Taliban. They just rely on word of mouth, and they don't use any electronics, because if you're using electronics like Dudayev used in Chechnya, he was picking up the phone to speak to Yeltsin, and it was only satellite phones at that stage, and then a missile hit him. Because they knew exactly where he was.
The missile was actually designed to home in on his phone and blow him up.
All guerrilla forces all over the world are very well aware. You've got to hack into their stuff, but make sure you're invisible by not having an electronic stuff of your own.
Fascinating. Anyway, Sally Bear, thanks very much for joining us. I'll put some links up to your stuff on our show page, and also, of course, to Vodafone, their press page, their anonymous press page, to Bristol is Open, and also to Bristol Smart City. Anyway, there's this big debate raging, apparently, about Brexit, and we've got two contenders to be Prime Minister. The first one is Boris Johnson, and he thinks that unless they get it right, the Tory party could be finished.
We are facing an existential crisis as